actually have three names. It's Erica, Perkins Jasper. I told these guys I would briefly introduce myself, but I actually am going to have them introduce themselves. If I do my job well today as a moderator, this will be the most you hopefully hear me talking. We'll kind of throw some questions at these three and have a little fun. But I think the focus today is really kind of the current college game. I picked out three of my favorite college tennis coaches, all from kind of different eras, so to speak. And Lauren and I are from a similar era, and I used to always pick somebody who was my age, thinking that we were the young group of coaches, and I had that realization a couple weeks ago that we're not, are we? No, so we're the old guys now. I don't know, that makes you, Mark. But this should be a lot of fun. I will ask a couple questions to kind of get the ball rolling, but really, I don't think anything's off limits today, right?
Nothing.
All right, so I'll have our panelists introduce themselves.
She said that really nicely by people from a different era. And so when she said, introduce yourself briefly, I kind of went, from a year standpoint, she was like, okay, just go through that quickly because that's a lot of years. But Mark Beyers, I'm currently the head women's tennis coach at the University of Mississippi. Originally from Holland, came to the United States in '87, played collegiate tennis at Armstrong State in Savannah, Georgia. Was a GA there, head women's coach there, and then became the assistant men's coach at Ole Miss from '95 to 2001, and then have been the head women's coach at the University of Mississippi since 2001. So that's a lot of years in about 30 seconds there.
Hi everybody. I'm Lauren Embree. I'm originally from South Florida. I played college tennis at the University of Florida, go Gators. Graduated in 2013, played on tour for about 2.5, 3 years. Then went back and helped out Florida as a volunteer for about a year, and now I just finished my first year at Pepperdine in Mountain. So thanks for having me, Erica.
She's being very humble. This is probably the most decorated SEC player, both female and male. So don't let her be too humble. But I'm Lauren Spencer. I'm from Groesbeck, Texas, and there's only my mom here that knows where that is, but it's by Waco. It's about 3,500 people. We have a Sonic. But I grew up in Central Texas, and I played college tennis at Louisiana Tech. I then went to SMU. I started as a volunteer assistant coach, then a full-time assistant coach, and then at 25 years old, I became a head coach at SMU and had no business being a head coach, but learned very quickly. I was there for 9 years total, and then Auburn, Alabama called, and I had never been to Auburn, Alabama, and been there since 2011. So that's
So we'll ask them a follow-up from there. I think a lot of you got to know my boss earlier, Tim, who did an introduction, and he will be speaking, I think, tomorrow. But my current job is I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Collegiate Tennis Association. So my job is actually to work with these great people and a lot of you who are in the audience today. And I'm pretty fortunate in what I get to do is I get to do fun things like this. But basically, I went to college in 1997 and then basically have done college tennis ever since. I spent 9 years as a Division I college coach. I worked at USTA Player Development in the collegiate tennis area, and now I have this job with the ITA. So this is our world. This is what we love. But I'm going to pick on these guys first. What do you love most about college coaching? Is this the right day to ask you? Okay.
Yeah, it's good. No, I use my tennis shoes. No, it's I think the people. I learned really, really quickly that just the people that you get to work with, not just the kids, because especially with females, colleges are really, it's a tough transition for females, and they kind of come into their own, and to be able to be a mentor, and that's basically why I got into this, is because I wanted to be someone, especially a strong female figure in their life, to where when they go through a transition of what they want to do in life, they're not with their parents, and so they have to figure out it's not their parents' dream anymore. It's like you have to own whatever you decide to do, and so you're transitioning into adulthood, which is very difficult, especially for tennis players who a lot of us come up in situations where we have strong parents and we've been told what to do for a while, and now it's like you have to tell, okay, what do you want to do? And a lot of blank faces come up and like, wait, what do you mean? What am I going to do? because a lot of them do not go on to play pro tennis, and it's like, okay, what happens life after tennis? So it's really exciting, it's frightening, it's challenging, but I think that we are all very blessed to be able to work with some really great kids and be able to be role models to them and help them, and it's going to affect them, you know, when they're 30, 40, 50 years old. You're always going to look back as your college coach, and we hope it's just a really good, positive experience that they can go back and tell their kids about.
I think, kind of echo what Lauren said. I mean, I love my role of being an assistant, and I think a lot of that has to do with it being really relationship-based. I love more than anything, obviously, being on the court with them, but when they're in our offices just talking to us about life outside tennis, and that's a big reason why I got into college coaching, because when I was in college, I was in my coach's offices all the time, daily, good or bad, just talking to them about random things. And that's what I like, honestly, is one of my favorite parts is when the girls come in and just talk to me about other things besides tennis. Because there's so much that goes on, there's so much that you have to handle when you're 17, 18. We have a girl that was 16 when she came to Pepperdine. I wasn't there her first year, but even her second year, like, she's dealing with all this stuff. She's a 4.0 student, like, she's insane. And so just to have that relationship, I think, is one of the most important things for them to develop when they're done with school.
Yeah, I think sometimes we constantly think about winning, and we got to win the SEC, or we've got to win a national title, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And those things are great, and they're part of the job. But I happened to have dinner with one of my former players and her mom last night. They were in town for the US Open watching, and it was great to catch up with them. And at some point in time during the dinner, the girl said, she goes, "Coach, you know, I just want to thank you for, you know, the college experience I had. You have no idea what kind of an impact you made on me." And you know, Mom said, you know, she just changed from being a kid when she started in college to being just a fantastic woman, fantastic person. And it just kind of, I hadn't had a chance to really hear that from them, and it's one of the things that you don't realize how much of an impact you have on some of these ladies at times, and it was just fantastic to hear. And that's, you know, kind of, that's really what it's about, those relationships. And I just echo what some of these guys said. Sometimes we get so caught up in the winning, we get so caught up in the recruiting wars and things like that. And you know, whether it's in tennis or whether they become successful in whatever they do, when you feel like you had a little something to do with that, and a little, you know, an impact in their life, a positive impact, is just a fantastic feeling.
Well, these guys touched on it well, all three of them, and I think you can understand the type of coaches they all are. But Mark, will pick on you first because you actually have coached men's teams and women's teams. What do you feel like are the really cool opportunities working with female student athletes? Obviously, there's impact, but we dive in a little bit more in terms of all the aspects there.
Yeah. Again, you never know what kind of an impact you're going to make on a specific person. You know, whether it's with male or females. First of all, I enjoyed coaching both on the men's side at Ole Miss, and now the last 17 years, you know, on the women's side at Ole Miss. First of all, I think there's so many opportunities for women. There's, I mean, lots and lots of scholarships available, and it's just one of those things where you see different people. We deal with kids from 18 to 22, you know, usually, and you know, some of the things that Lauren said, when they come in, they're trying to find themselves. They're trying to find an identity of, you know, who they are. You go from a tennis player, or, you know, a person that's always been, you know, the parents always took care of everything, going to tennis tournaments, going to, you know, driving to practices, things like that. And now they come into college, they figure out, okay, what do I want from a tennis standpoint? What do I want from an academic standpoint? And for them to find themselves in college and really figure out, you know, who they are, what they want to become, it's just great to see. And again, just to have a small impact in some of those choices that they make, and then see them become successful in, you know, whatever it is. I went to a couple of my players' weddings this past year. You know, it's like that one of them was like, "Can you speak?" And I'm like, I don't know if I can speak and not cry at this, you know, when I'm speaking, because it's just, I'm so proud of these kids for the transition they've made and what they've done, not just from a wins and losses standpoint, but just you know, what they've done with their life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge when you bring in players, you spend so much effort and time recruiting them, and then you have the opportunity to coach them for 4 years and to be around them every single day. And I think building their trust and earning kind of your trust and building that relationship is huge with females especially. I think they thrive on the culture and the trust and the relationships and all of those things. So I think even when I was a player, I was having a coach that was being able to relate to me and understand kind of everything I'm going through is kind of just what some of the girls are looking for at the end of the day. They're not looking for so much tactical things on the tennis court, but just being able to help them out in other areas. And yeah, I think also being a coach, you're dealing with 7 or 8 different personalities and different girls, so you have to be able to expand your personality to fit what they want. You're not going to coach one girl the same as you're going to coach another girl. And if you coach everybody the same, then you might get into some trouble. But yeah, so I think just being able to relate to all of them and kind of just help them with whatever they need, because like Lauren said, their mom and dad aren't there. It's basically you and your boss or your head coach and the assistant trying to guide them in the right direction.
You mentioned asked what the difference was, and so I was actually joking back there with some of the Washington coaches where we'll be friends today. Saturday is a different story. But one of the things I talk about when people ask me is, I think one of the differences between coaching a men's team and a women's team, and granted I've never coached a men's team, but I've observed several, is the communication part. I tell people sometimes it's like having 10 cats in a bag and shaking it up. But you have to realize we go from a sport in juniors where everyone is against each other, and there's very few times in junior tennis where it can be where everyone's on a team. And I think we're doing a really good job in juniors to create more opportunities in team type thing. But a lot of these girls are coming from very individual situations where, and I have to ask them even in the recruiting process, they're like, well, I didn't like her. I'm like, do you want to play with her or do you want to play against her? And when I ask that, it's very interesting because they're like, well, she is really good. And I don't want South Carolina to get her. Yeah, that's fine, I'll make it work. So, but we come from a situation where it's very individualized and then you've got to have them work together. And I think for men's, I've seen where we've had, guys on men's teams who can win a national championship in doubles, but off the court they hate each other. It's not like that sometimes with women. And there's also times where, a guy possibly, and that's just us as women, kind of hold on to things where things could happen in fall season that trickles over into spring season. So I always tell, I'm a shirt that says it, I'm a conflict manager, because I have to make sure that everyone is communicating properly. And as females, sometimes we hold things in, and we don't properly communicate with each other, and things get bigger than it needs to be. So I think one of the things that I like to make sure from freshman year to senior year is that they are communicating properly, not just for them, for other people, but also for themselves, because when they get into a work-related situation, they're going to have to communicate with the people that they work with. They're going to have to communicate what they want to their bosses and that sort of thing. And so it's just one of those things. I think that female athletes, like I said, you have to kind of be very proactive in helping them learn how to communicate with each other and others, and then also with coaches. Like I said, guys sometimes something can happen and next day they're fine and it never gets brought up again. But I think a lot of times with females, that can trickle over into something bigger that it doesn't need to be. So communication, I think, is really important for the females.
And maybe to throw a little wild card for Lauren, but obviously, your role as female college coaches, and you got started very young, Lauren, you're starting very young. Talk a little bit about kind of the importance of your role as a female role model for your players.
Yeah, I think it's something that I want them to, and I'm very open with them of like I make mistakes, and so I actually teach more about my mistakes than I do when it comes to just the successes as well, because I think that's really important for you to look and say, okay, this person made a mistake and I would have probably done it better. I think it goes with everything as far as how I juggle my 2 sons and my 10 daughters all at the same time, or how I deal with my husband, or how I deal with my boss or my assistant coach. And so I try to make sure that they know about my failures just as much as my successes. And I do think that when we were growing up, we didn't have a large quantity of female coaches that we could say, oh, I want to be, great. And there are. So I look at Stella at UCLA. I look at Paige at Miami, and I've gone up to those people a ton of people say, okay, how did you do this being a wife and a mother and a professional, and you're doing it at the highest level? So I think learning from what they've done, and then also, like I said, my own failures, I think is really important, because I don't want this to seem like this is just so easy. You know, you have to be able to prioritize your time, and then also be realistic with sometimes you're going to fail, and that's just going to be okay. You know, you learn from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think I try and tell the girls more of an approach as, I did this wrong, so I want you to try and do it this way, or don't do what I did, but trust me, if I knew this back when I was 18 or 19, then I would have been probably a better player, and you know, all that. But I think also being consistent with what I tell them and trying to just motivate them, and just to try and always do the right thing, you know, no matter kind of who's watching or who's looking, but always try and be a good example. You don't always have to say something to lead, and I try and tell them that all the time, just do it, you know, and then people will follow. And I think being able to relate back when I was in school a couple years ago, that maybe that's helpful, because I know what they're going through and I know what they're trying to deal with. I think as a player, I had to be happy in order to perform my best on the court. So I want to make sure they're happy off the court, and then usually that kind of follows on court.
Change gears a little bit, but we have, you know, a good mix of college coaches, but also junior coaches in the room. Talk a little bit about kind of the recruiting landscape. Obviously, all three of these coaches are at, you know, top 10 Division I schools. They're recruiting the best players, but maybe talk a little bit about the landscape. What do you see maybe as advantages that you're seeing in maybe American players out there, and what are some things you think American juniors could work on?
Well, first of all, I think the recruiting process has become, you know, in looking back 25 years ago and now, it's become so much more competitive. I think especially with the Power 5 schools, recruiting budgets have become bigger, so coaches are at every tournament, whether it's in the United States or it's around the world. You'd be amazed if you go to a 15,000 somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you know, first person I see is Joey Scrivano from Baylor or something like that. Again, because of that, it's become 24/7. It's more like almost like football recruiting. Some good things about that is I think that there are more coaches that are going out to see players. So players that maybe don't have the funds to go play, if they don't get to play national hardcourts, or they don't get to play the Eddie Herr, or they don't get to play, you know, coaches are going to find these players just because there are more funds available. The bad thing, some of the things that are starting to happen in college tennis is you get some of the kids maybe decommitting, and then before they even, and you know, all of a sudden now they're, and these used to be issues that just football and basketball had. Now it has become more competitive. You know, it takes a lot more than just going to see a kid one time like it did 25 years ago. Just constantly, you know, recruiting. Even after a kid commits, you've got to make sure that you stay, you know, in contact with that kid, obviously, and you know, you just don't want to. You want to make sure that not anybody else all of a sudden, you know, takes that kid away. And those are just things that are becoming reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think at Pepperdine, I just finished my first year, so I don't have as much experience as these two guys. But I think a lot, we have a mix between American and international kids, and I think it's funny to see the relationship kind of grow as you start to recruit international, because when you talk to international players, I find they all want to go pro, you know, and I think Nick said like 1% actually goes pro and makes it. So you get a lot of no's, you get a lot of, oh, I don't, like, where is your school? You get a lot of, like, how good are you guys? How many spots do you have? You just need to educate them more on the college process, and that it's not a failure, you know, if you go to school. And I think that's the big challenge for me, is trying to understand how do they not know that, but then trying to educate them on, hey, you can get so much out of college if you find the right fit for yourself, and if the coaches find the right fit for their players. So those are just some challenges, but the great thing about it, American and internationally, is you just build relationships and you talk to players, or you can be recruiting a player for, you know, six months to a year, and they might not go to school, they might not come to your school, but at the end of the day, they probably found the right fit for them. And you just want what's best for the player, because then it works out, obviously, for you as a coach too.
I think one of the most challenging things for everyone, coaches, recruiting, parents, junior coaches, is that we could sit up here next year and everything has changed. And that's, so NCAA rules, I think, is the hardest part of recruiting. And not because of what you can't do, but then it's also what you can do. So like recently, now we can have juniors take official visits. In October, we will now have a transfer a system where people can just go and get themselves in the transfer list, and you can transfer and not tell the coaches. And so it's not just with what we do, but it's also, like Lauren said, educating. Not only do you have to educate the coaches on the new rules, because they're all different, you then have to educate the players, you have to educate the parents, you have to educate the junior coaches. And so, and this could change at any time. And so it's just a constant of, okay, now what can we do, what we can't do. And so you might have, I have two sons, I have a 6-year-old, and then I have a 20-month-old. And if they were to go into any kind of sports, what might happen with the 6-year-old once he's at recruiting age and the 20-month-old could be completely different. And so it's one of those things that it's tough for the parents, because they're trying to keep up with what can I do and what can, you know, it's not just the coaches, it's every single person and educating every single one of us. And so I think it's very challenging, because you just have literally no idea what the NCAA is going to happen with them, and then you add in all these conference rules. So it's just a big challenge, because we're trying to, you know, abide by the rules that are constantly changing. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face right now.
Yeah, I mean, evolution for recruiting is a scary one, I think, for these guys on a daily basis, and for those of your coaching players, I think one to keep an eye on. So we talked a little about evolution, but let's pick on you guys personally a little bit. I'll pick on Mark first, only because he's the most seasoned in the group. Talk about your evolution as a coach. We talked about it earlier, but kind of, you know, who were you as a coach when you started? Who are you now? What's kind of shaped how you do things? And what's that ideal experience of a student athlete, say, coming through your program now? Sure.
It was funny, Nick was actually talking, when he was earlier, talking about listening. As a young coach, when I came out, I wanted to make sure that the players I was coaching on court, you know, in college, we were able to be on court all the time. I just wanted to tell them everything, all at once, everything I knew, everything you know, the way to change this match, technically, tactically, you know, what can we do to change this? And what I realized over the years is that I'm just, you know, giving these kids way too much information. Like, you know, all of a sudden this kid's confused, going, okay, you want me to do this, you want me to do that? And so I think what I've learned over the years is to listen a lot more to the kids, and to just to talk less, whether that's in practice, whether that's, you know, on the court. Again, not because I didn't have the information, but I realized that as a young coach getting into this profession, it's almost like I wanted to prove myself and show that, oh, I know this and I know that and I realized that, again, I was just giving these kids way too much information. So the one thing, probably the biggest change as far as my evolution as a coach, is to listen a lot more to these kids and let them talk about how they're feeling on the court, what they're thinking, you know, they need to work on, how they feel like a certain match they can change, and then kind of go from there. So that's probably the biggest difference that I've made in my coaching career.
And Lauren, talk a little bit maybe your perception of what being a coach is going to be like, and maybe the reality too, since you just made the transition.
Yeah, for sure. I think after this first year, I told my boss, Per, that I've learned so much on as far as the coaching side and the recruiting side and the rules side and the compliance side. All of that was completely new to me. Obviously, my favorite part is hitting with the girls, being out there with the girls, trying to help them any way I can. But one thing that was a challenge for me was having to, I think I said it earlier, was like expand my personality to try and help 8 different girls. We had a team of 6 international girls from all different parts of the country, and I think that they can help each other if they try and make each other better. And I think that's one thing, as a player, you need to have a little bit of selfishness, but at the same time you have to see the big picture. And I think as a coach now, I see the big picture a little bit better. I definitely saw it a little bit as a player, and I wanted my team to always win, and I always tried to put the team before myself, and I think that goes a long way. I think team culture, and if you can build that, if they can buy into that, it goes a lot farther than talent and just individualizing yourself instead of trying to just focus on yourself. You have to see the big picture, and you need that team cohesion. So I try at my first year, I'm still learning so much, I still don't know like close to everything. Everything kind of goes super fast sometimes for me, but just trying to focus on those things I think has helped our team a lot.
I think probably like Mark said, listening is a big factor. But I think one of the biggest things I've learned from when I was 25 to now is probably the recruiting process of it. And you know, when I first started out, I wanted to win, and I still want to win. You mess both these. But at the same time, I found out through experience that the number beside the player is not going to make a national championship team. I mean, if you look at, and so to me, the character part of the kid, and where they come from and who their parents are and their upbringing, and it has to be a huge factor for me. And knowing that, you know, one person doesn't just make a team. And so for me, character and, you know, just how that person is going to evolve as a person, not just a tennis player, is huge. And I think I definitely, when I came to Auburn, you know, decided I was going to make sure that every player that we recruited was going to be, you know, a high quality person that is going to have their individual goals and dreams, but at the same time going to be a really good teammate. Because one, especially on a female team, that one person can make everyone's life miserable if you add in someone that might be selfish and just want what's best for them. And so to me, we try really hard to go after obviously really talented kids, but that are also going to be really good teammates. And I think that's just through experience, you kind of say, okay, this wasn't the best idea, and you want this to be fun. Like I said, this is just a pit stop in their life, and so we hope it's a really good one. And so we just hope that you know, in that they develop relationships and bonds with their sisters that they can have as being positive experiences.
Any questions from the audience for these guys? But we still have a little bit of time, Dee Dee.
Well, how do you view tennisrecruiting.net versus UTR?
Yeah, it's you know, obviously UTR just a little bit newer. I think for me personally, the more ways I have to kind of gauge, you know, players. I mean, I think when you know, tennis recruiting came, I mean, I definitely used that at times, or not at times, all the time. UTR coming in is just, I think it's a great addition. So you got, you know, you have the ITF ranking or things like that. You've got the UTR, you've got tennis recruiting. In this case, more information, you know, is better, and I think every single one of those has a place, and it's definitely helped us. The one thing that, you know, in addition to all those, what Lauren touched upon, is then we go out and watch these kids, and then you try and look at their character and feel that if they fit in. But listen, I think for us, the more information, you know, the better, and they all have a, you know, their place there.
Yeah, I mean, I think UTR and tennis recruiting are huge and helpful to just gauging kind of if, you know, you want to go watch them play, or kind of you don't really want to ever take a kid based on their results. You always want to just go watch them play and, like Lauren said, feel them out, like see how they act, see how they are acting, or how their peers like them, engage with their parents. But I definitely think that it's helpful, and like Mark said, the more information we have, obviously it can never hurt.
When we did a panel a few days ago at the TTC, and I thought it was really interesting. We had a coach up here, and I think you guys have probably all seen something similar happen, but she was doing a camp. The first couple days was training, and then they told the campers, okay, these next 2 days you're playing matches, and this counts towards your UTR. And she said that basically she saw a shift immediately in these kids, and kind of the messaging from the entire group is that it really is just a tool, and much like anything else, whether it's a ranking system or rating system, etc., kids and parents can get a little caught up in those numbers. And I think anytime as coaches where you can be reminding those student athletes that in fact it really is just a tool and a range. And I mean, these are 3 of the most successful Division I programs on the women's side, and have they really talked a ton about ratings and tennis specifics? No. They've talked a lot about the character of the kids, the experience of the student athlete, and that is really what it's about. And I think remembering that it's not all about the numbers. Any other questions? Yes.
It's very interesting listening to you guys talk and explaining what your interests are in student athletes, basically. What I'm left wondering is over the years with this winning concept of college coaches where you have athletes, I'm speaking on behalf of mostly African athletes that come into the universities, they get the feeling that it's always about winning. So what we end up having, which is one of the reasons why most of them feel if you're going to college, your pro career is as good as, or rather your professional dreams are as good as done, because they feel if you're not winning, you're not important, you're not being helped. So I don't know how you're able to help curb that, because that's a mentality that I think even we have. So even our juniors that are we're trying to convince to come to college, ourselves, we're not very sure if that's the right route, if they still want to play professional. If they're getting into top 100 in juniors with very little exposure, we're not sure if college is the right route. But from what you presented today, I'm thinking it's actually very good. And I've known that it's been good because I've seen the success rate for some of the colleges. But how do you help have that mentality?
Are they allowed to answer this even though we got the beeper?
30 seconds each.
Go.
Okay. Here's the great thing about college. You can always come and try, okay? The other thing too is a lot of our programs were actually, I have girls on my team that are gonna play pro tournaments this fall, and a lot of programs can. I think the thing about it is, you have to think about is that what happens if in October you have a injury that your federation takes all the money away, because that does happen. College is an opportunity, and I think Danielle Collins is speaking on it really great for us, is that you have your backup plan and you're educating. And it's really important for every country in this world to educate their females. And so for us, there's a lot more coaches out here that are giving professional opportunities to their players to play in the fall tournaments. And so for us, and again, if it comes and it's great and you can capitalize on that and go pro, you come in here to our universities and you're killing it in college. If you can kill it in college, then you can go on the pro tour, and it's a stepping stone. And so that's what I think all of our programs are doing, is using it as a stepping stone. Because if you have a kid that comes to one of our programs and she does well, like a Danielle Collins, it only promotes that university. You know, it only promotes college tennis. And for us, again, it's not like you have to come and you're chained to that university. If something happens, you can always, leave. But it's a great way to have your education paid for, because sometimes tennis is going to end. Serena's going to end, and she's going to have something else that she needs to do or want to do. And so it's a place where you can have a really good plan B and also have your college and pro experience.
Oh, you took everybody's
I'm sorry.
Sarah, that's great. You crushed it though.
If you want to hear more of their opinions on this, you can step outside during the break. We've got one more thing before the break. I want to thank these three for giving up their time to be here with us. And we have Furkan, is he outside, inside?